Hi everyone, it's Mr. Sentry, and today I have the pleasure to talk to you about the absorption of water and other mineral salts from the soil by plant roots. And that conversation is a real important one because when you think about it, what's more important than water being taken up by the roots and various other minerals? It's not just for the root, it's for the entire plant itself. And so ultimately what we're going to be talking about is how those water and minerals move across the root and into the stele and then go up into the shoot system. And so let's jump right into that conversation. And so great picture below here. You can notice that here we are in the soil under the microscope. You can see that the epidermal layer right here of a root has these root hairs, which provide with the ability of, for example, if there's water in the soil, it's the root hairs which are picking it up. And then look at the increase in surface area that you have right there. Isn't that incredible? Look at that. So water and other minerals. What other minerals? Well, minerals such as potassium is a favorite of plants. And there's magnesium, and all of these minerals are going to be taken in via diffusion, osmosis, and also there's specific proteins embedded in the membrane that will allow those to go across. And so that's what we're talking about. So water enters into the root via the root hairs, and then what happens is that it needs to sort of cross through the cortex right there. So here's water, and it's moving across right there, and then ultimately it needs to pass into the vascular cylinder, which is called the stele. So let's take a look at that. And so when water, this is a great picture of the cortex. Look how purple the starch granules are staining. So when the water is, now look at this for water for a second. Water could sort of move apoplastically. Do you remember that? Apoplastically. In other words, like through cell walls and between cells, like that. But that means that there's really no regulatory mechanism. Dissolved in that water could be harmful toxic compounds. There could even be some minerals that the rest of the tree really frankly doesn't need. Sometimes it wants potassium and it does not want sodium. So what will happen is it'll reach the endodermis, which is this sort of circular ring of cells of the stele. It's really technically the innermost layer of the cortex. But do you see this red waxy material? That's going to prevent anything from passing apoplastically. And so the water is like bing, 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 and bounces up with that. And then ultimately it has to cross through a cell membrane. And if there's no specific permease for a toxic or for a particular ion, it's not going to get in. So the endodermis can regulate what gets into the stele. So that's pretty interesting. And so ultimately, like I was mentioning, water and minerals enter into the root cortex, so they're moving through laterally. And they can't get transported to the rest of the plant until they enter into the xylem elements, which are right here in the stele. And you're not going to be able to do that apoplastically, as I mentioned. Like you might be able to get in to the root. In other words, you know, the cell wall is kind of hydrophilic, and so it can allow for the uptake of water and some other minerals in there, and you can sort of sneak around, but eventually, bing, 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 you're going to run it up until this waxy strip that surrounds each of the cells of the endodermis, and then ultimately you're going to need to cross through the cell membrane. Now, if you entered in symplastic, in other words, you did cross the cell membrane, you're good to go at that point. Obviously, if you're in the cytoplasm, you're able to pass through the plasmodesmata, you're able to cruise in, you're good to go. So you can enter. And so here's a really cool picture right here of the endodermis. And you see that little line right there? That line is the Casparian strip, or that waxy material. And so the endodermis functions really as a selective sentry. So a sentry is like a guard, the guardian of the vascular tissue. Because once you get into the elevator, it's sort of like if you're security at a building, you got to put your security sort of in the lobby. and then you need to like keep any trouble out. If somebody were to break into a building and then get into the elevator, which is what this vascular tissue is, it's over. It can go up to any floor, harass everybody. So it's like I put all my forces right down in the lobby. I put all my guards right around the elevator shaft. It's kind of like that. It's the sort of last checkpoint for the selective passage of materials into the vascular tissue. And so plants are pretty sharp that way. And so again, minerals that are already crossing through the cell membrane symplastically can enter into this steel no problem. And so this Casparian strip, just once again, is this waxy material that prevents unwanted, it's impervious to water. It kind of reminds me of that sort of black rubber material that surrounds the window a little bit, sort of not allowing water to seep through there, like in, for example, in a car. So I kind of like that, and it's sort of like a centurion that's guarding, preventing anything unwanted to getting into the steel. And there's another picture of the Casparian strip right there. And so these minerals, if you're going to get in, you got to cross through the cell membrane. And if you cross through the cell membrane, you're probably good to go. And so there it is, a picture of it again, highlighted in red. So the minerals follow, if they come into the cell, if they follow this sort of apoplastic route, they're eventually blocked by the Casparian strip. There. Here's another picture of the Casparian strip, and you're like, well, this is different than this. That's because this is a dicot root, xylem phloem. This is clearly a monocot root. Same principle, though. Monocot is sort of like corn or grass. Dicot is like a bean. So these, this again, it's probably clear, but apoplastic route is where water is trying to sneak around. It's not really sneaking, but it can sneak around the cell walls of plants, and therefore it can get by anything selective. But if you go symplastic, you have to go through a cell membrane. And so selective proteins in the membrane, both in the plasma membrane and the tonoplast, because, check this out. You don't want anything going into your vacuole. So there's some selective, let me go there, there's some selective permeable proteins, selective in the tonoplast membrane as well. So that's kind of a cool point right there. So one of the things that I want to say, it's still basically a conversation about absorption, is that in addition to the root hairs providing a tremendous amount of surface area, as you can see right here, there's a hugely important symbiotic relationship that plants have with fungi. Now, these are two different kingdoms, and that's fine. You might be familiar with the relationship that plant roots have with bacteria. It's a different kingdom also. The bacteria are able to, when they live symbiotically with plants, they're able to help nitrogen fix, which increases nitrogen for the plant. So this is a great thing, and in return, the bacteria get sugar from the plant. Well, likewise, plants have a symbiotic relationship with fungi, and that relationship is also down here under the soil in the root. And that those fungi are increasing the potential for plants to absorb water and minerals. And, excuse me, this is called mycorrhizae. How's that? So mycorrhizae, which are this fungi which extends the plant's ability to absorb water and minerals, is very, very important. Let's take a look at that. So here's a picture of the mycorrhizae. Look at this. Here's the plant root, and all of these are these fungal-like roots. They're not true roots. They're called hyphae. And what that's doing is it's a relationship between the fungi and the plant. And that fungi enables the plant to be able to absorb so much more water and so much more mineral than it would on its own rights. Most plants wouldn't survive without the mycorrhizae. It's that critical. And so not all plants have it, but most do. If you have this mycorrhizae association going, you're said to be like infected. It's not a bad thing now. So what good does the fungi? What good does it? It also gets sugar. And plants are very good at photosynthesizing, and so the root is a good storage, as you remember, of starch. And so the fungi like this. And they get lots of sugar, and it enables them to grow. And so in return, they're able to help the plant absorb water and minerals. Here is a really good picture as well. Here's the plant root, and here's the mycorrhizae extending, allowing it to absorb even more water into the plant root, mycorrhizae. Here's another picture of the mycorrhizae. It creates an enormous amount of surface area for the plant to grow in the root. Here's more mycorrhizae. And so this mutual association between the roots of a plant and fungi is not only critical to the survival of terrestrial plants, but it's believed to be one of the most crucial steps in the colonization of plants onto land. Because without this sort of assistance, if you will, maybe the roots alone weren't sufficient at capturing, especially early on, all the water and minerals that they needed. Because plants living in the water, algal ancestors didn't really have true roots. And so this mycorrhizae, not only important today, but in the past. And so I hope you enjoyed this conversation that we had about plant absorption. Thanks for watching.